Section 3.3, slope of a line. All right, the slope of a line. That's the single most important thing about any line that you will know. That's the one thing we will always want to know about the line, the one thing we will always compute. The slope tells us two things about the line that we'll investigate. It tells us steepness and direction. Those are the two important things slope tells us. Okay, so let's take a look at a line here. I'm just going to draw a line. And I'm going to give you 2 points on this line. This is the point -1, 0. And this is the point that looks like it's about 5, 6. So what do we mean by slope? Slope is a ratio. Ratio is a fancy word for fraction. Slope is a ratio. It's generally written as the ratio of rise to run. So what that means is, let's say I start at the point -1, 0, and I want to walk to the point 5, 6. But I'm going to walk this way. I'm going to start at -1, 0, and I'm going to walk straight up until I get to the right height, and then I'm going to walk straight across. So how far up would I have to walk? Well, I started at 0, and I've got to get up to a height of 6. So I would have to go up 6 units. So my rise here is 6. And then what's my run? My run would be I would start here at x equals -1, and I got to go across over here till I get to x equals 5. Going from -1 to 5, that's 6 steps. So my run would be 6. So my rise over run in this case, my rise would be 6. My run would be 6. So my slope is 1. All right, let me draw you another line here. Okay, so right away, by the way I drew this line, you should see that this line is quite a bit steeper than the first line I drew. This one also has the point -1, 0. But it has this point right here, which looks like about 1, 4. So here's what I mean when the slope tells you steepness. This slope, when we compute it, this one should be bigger because the line is more steep. The bigger the slope, the more steep the line. The smaller the slope, the flatter the line. All right, so again, let's compute our rise and our run. Our rise, we walk up here. I start at 0, and I go up to 4. So that's 4 steps. And then I got to start here, and I got to go to the right. I go from -1 to 1. That's 2 steps. So my rise over run is my slope. And that would be, rise was 4, run was 2, so my slope is 2. So you can see how slope tells you steepness. When you have a big slope number, your line is going to be very steep. When you have a small slope number, your line is going to be flat. What do I mean by direction? Here's what I mean by direction. Look at this line. How's this line different from the first two? Well, it's pretty clear. This line goes downhill as you go from left to right. The first two lines went uphill as you went from left to right. Okay, let's pick a couple points on this line. I'm just going to make up a couple points here. Let's say we were told this is the point -2, 3. And this is the point 6, 1. Once again, my slope is going to be rise over run, which is, oops, I called this 6, 1. Of course, that has to be 6, -1 because it's below the axis. Okay, so let's see. This time, if I start at my point -2, 3, this time I got to go down. So when we go down, we would consider that rise to be negative. So I went from 3 to -1, I've got to go down 4. So my rise is -4. My run, I go this way. I'm going to the right. That's still positive. I go from -2 to 6. That's 8 steps. So this time my slope is -4 over 8. That's -1/2. So notice the big difference here. When my line went uphill, my slopes turned out to be positive numbers. When my line goes downhill, my slope turned out to be a negative number. You know, I don't like the way that looks. I'm going to rewrite it, -1/2. My slope is negative because it went downhill. Okay, now for a lot of these problems, I'm not going to give you a picture. I'm just going to give you 2 points. And from the 2 points, you have to find the slope. But here's the key here. Notice where this -4 came from right here. Look at the y numbers we have. We had 3 and -1. If I were to take -1 minus 3, that would give me that -4 number. So there's my rise. To find my rise, I subtract the 2 y numbers. On the other hand, to get my run, if I started with a 6 and I subtracted -2, that would give me 8. So the run, you subtract the x numbers. So the common formula that you see for slope. Slope is always given by the letter m. Kind of strange, but it comes from the French word for mountain, which if you think of a line, kind of looks like a mountain. All right, so m is given by y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Notice where I wrote the y2 and the y1. Notice that the 2 and the 1 are down on the bottom there. They're not exponents. We're not squaring or doing anything like that. It just says we have 2 different y numbers, a y2 and a y1, we subtract them. We have an x2 and an x1, we subtract those. Okay, those are not exponents, just saying that we have 2 different y numbers, 2 different x numbers. All right, so here's your typical question. It's going to be find the slope through the points, and it'll give you a couple points. -3, 4, and 1, -2. And then it will say determine if does this line rise, fall, is it horizontal, or is it vertical? We haven't talked about horizontal and vertical yet. We will in just a minute. We'll see, we get some interesting things. Okay, well, we use our formula slope. M equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. All right, so I picked the second y number. The second y number given to me was a -2, minus the first y number given was a 4. Divided by 1, because that was the second x number, minus -3. -2 minus 4 is -6. 1 minus -3, that's 1 plus 3, that's 4. I can reduce. -3/2. Our slope turned out to be a negative number, so our line falls. And that's pretty much what most of the problems are going to look like. You find the slope using the formula, determine if it rises, falls, horizontal, vertical. All right, so let's quickly talk about horizontal and vertical here. I'm going to draw you a horizontal line. Horizontal line might look like this. And here are some points on it. -1, 3, and 4, 3. What can you tell me about the slope? Well, if you remember that slope is rise over run, you should see that, what's the rise? Well, to go from -1, 3 to 4, 3, I don't have to rise at all. I go straight across. My rise is 0. I don't go up and down at all, where my run would be 5. 5 units to the right. 0 over 5 is 0. All right, so there's a fact about horizontal lines. If you have a horizontal line, slope will always equal 0. Conversely, what about a vertical line? Well, here's a vertical line. This vertical line goes through negative 2, 2, and negative 2, negative 1. This time I'll just use the formula, although I could use the rise over run idea. Slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. That's going to be minus 1 minus 2 divided by negative 2 minus negative 2. Notice what happens this time. I get negative 3 over 0, which makes sense. It makes sense that my run is 0 because I'm not moving left or right at all. But we remember from earlier things that you can never have 0 on bottom. Slope is undefined. And that will always happen with a vertical line. Okay, so there's your fact about a vertical line. So for a vertical line, slope is always undefined. So notice the difference. Horizontal line, you always get slope 0. Vertical line, you always get slope undefined.